David, thank you for that very gracious introduction. Thank yous also are in order to the Minister of the Public Security Office, Mr. Abranovich. I want to thank him and his ministry for the opportunity for me to come and speak to you today about an issue that is so important in our democracies, policing. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Danino for the courtesies that have been extended by his office during our visit and the opportunity to get more acquainted with him and the Israeli police services. So, Minister and Commissioner, thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I want to talk with you today about the expression, collaborate or perish. It happens to be the title of my latest book. And I think it is very appropriate to the subject that we are talking about here today, about the issue of policing in the 21st century, about the issue of policing in a democracy. We are fortunate in the United States and Israel to live in two of the world's strongest democracies. But with a democracy comes certain obligations for the police and for the public. In a democracy, the first obligation of government is public safety. And in a democracy, the entity that is responsible for providing public safety is the criminal justice system, the courts, the prosecutors, defense attorney, and the police. I have spent 44 years of my life in policing or associated with policing. I love the profession of policing. I love that every day when I go to work, I have the opportunity to make a difference in the lives in New York City of 8.5 million people. I have the opportunity to have a life of significance. Policing has changed a lot in the 44 years that I have been associated with it. I began my police career in 1970 in the city of Boston as a policeman, walking a beat. All my young life, I had wanted to be a police officer, and in 1970, that dream came true for me. I have never regretted for a moment in these last 44 years that decision. I'd like to talk with you about policing in my country. I know something about your country, your police issues, the issues that your country faces around the issues of security, terrorism, counterterrorism. But I know so much more about my own country. And I'd like to share some of the thoughts about my country and its potential applicability to what you are dealing with currently in Israel. I have been a part of or led 3 revolutions in American policing as policing has continued to evolve. One of the exciting things about the police profession is we are constantly evolving. We are never stagnant. We are never standing still. Because if we do, then we are failing. And so the excitement of leading a police organization is that you have the opportunity to create change, that you can become the change, that you can lead in a direction that has such profound impact on society, a city, or a nation. My country in the 1970s was just coming out of the turbulence of the 1960s in our society. The civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, a society that was wrestling with what was thought to be too much government control. In policing as a profession, as part of the criminal justice system, indeed the criminal justice system itself was failing America. Our role is to prevent crime. Sir Robert Peel, my role model, my idol, the creator of the British Metropolitan Police, the London Bobbies, named after Robert Peel, Bobby Peel. In 1829, he issued 9 principles of policing that for me are my Bible. And I would encourage each and every one of you who are in policing to read those 9 principles. Written in 1829, they are even more appropriate to 2014 than when they were written so long ago. The first principle is the guiding principle of what policing should be all about. The primary mission of the police is to prevent crime and disorder. The primary mission of the police is to prevent crime and disorder. And for much of the American police history, we attempted to do that, but we failed. We failed miserably, as evidenced by the societal changes that were happening in my country in the 1960s and 70s. Policing was thought to be a failure. Policing as a profession was thought to be a failure. Academics, political leaders, police leaders began a revolution in policing in the 1970s, and it was called the professional model. The professional model, with its emphasis on educating police, its emphasis on responding to crime. And I emphasize that term, responding to crime, because police had been created initially to prevent crime, but we had failed to do it. So in my country, in my society, our government, our academics, our researchers, and many police leaders felt that police really could not prevent crime, that the role of a professional police organization, the measure of our success, should be our response to crime. It was a tragic mistake in the 1970s that we made. We emphasized, as our effort to professionalize policing, we emphasized rapid response, get to calls as quickly as we could, take the police officer out of the neighborhood and put him in a police car so he could cover a larger geographic area, but that he could also respond more quickly, and because he was more mobile, he could keep the criminal off guard. Also, we emphasized reactive investigations, the idea of improving our capability to investigate crime after it had occurred. And this was also a strengthening of the professional policing, the use of forensics, the improved use of technology to solve crime. But the focus was on responding to crime after the person had already become a victim. We also did something else in the 1970s that changed the face of policing in my country for the next 20 years. Because of the profound pressures on police in the 70s, an increasing workload, we developed a call system called 911. You dialed 911 and we would rapidly respond to your call. That very quickly we were overwhelmed with the number of calls coming into police for service. We could not keep up. So what we began to do was to narrow the focus of what we were going to work on. And in narrowing the focus, we were going to focus on serious crime, major crime, which in my country was identified by the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting System, similar to the national system that you are now creating. It emphasized focus on murders, rapes, robberies, serious assaults, car theft, domestic violence. There were 7 major categories. And policing throughout America began to neglect the policing of minor crime, quality of life crime. Some of what was discussed here this morning in the sessions, noise complaints, prostitution activities, graffiti, vandalism, gangs hanging on the corner, open-air sale of drugs, that we began to neglect quality of life crime. So instead of focusing on all crime, we prioritized. As my country moved into the 1980s, there were several additional societal trends that began to have significant negative impact on our ability to keep our streets safe. The growth of a drug market and a drug culture, particularly the more problematic drugs of heroin, cocaine, and then crack cocaine. The increasing number of young people coming out of a society that was no longer educating them, no longer controlling them, a dissolution of many of the families in our society, particularly among the poor and in the minority communities. And thirdly, a particular illness that afflicts my country more so than just about any other country in the world, and that's guns. There are now in America more guns than there are people. We love guns, and that is our misfortune, because guns create so much violence in my country. And when you associate it with young people and drugs and police that were ineffective, in the 1980s, we had a plague of violence that exploded. Fortunately, as we moved into the 1990s, 2 things happened. One, 1990 was the worst crime year in the history of America. The problems of the 70s and 80s, the police emphasis on responding to crime, inappropriate response to crime, by not paying attention to all crime, just serious crime, it had finally reached a crisis proportion. Worst crime year in the history of the United States. In the city of New York, my city, 2,242 murders in 1 year. Think of that, 2,242 people murdered in that one city in that 1 year. Additionally, an additional 7,000 people were shot and injured in that same city in that same year. 700,000 people. 1 out of every 10 people in New York City were the victims of a serious crime, a rape, a murder, an assault, a burglary, a car theft. But as importantly, the conditions in the city had deteriorated so badly that subway cars were covered with graffiti, the streets were feeling unsafe. Street prostitution, street narcotics dealing, violence, gangs, graffiti, litter, and police who seemingly were not effective at dealing with serious crime and certainly were not doing anything about the so-called quality of life crime. That was the city of New York in 1990, a city where people were leaving the city and not moving in, where tourism was in decline, where businesses did not want to invest. It was felt to be a city that was not safe, that was not under control. Fortunately, at the same time in my country, the experiences of New York were being felt around the country, and in reaction, police academics, researchers, police chiefs, the government, some political leaders, Mayor Giuliani in New York, President Bill Clinton, who was elected to the office of the presidency, began to embrace a new philosophy of policing. We could not do away with the professional model. We still needed to be able to respond to crimes that occurred. We still needed to improve our ability to investigate those crimes. We still needed to increase the professionalization of the police, the education levels, the training levels, the coordination levels. We could not do away with those. But we needed a new model, a new philosophy that could be effective against crime. I was one of the leaders of that revolution, first in 1990 as chief of police in the transit system in New York, then in 1992 as Boston Police Commissioner, and then in 1994, Mayor Giuliani hired me as his first police commissioner. And we began the revolution of the policing in the 1990s that included the embrace of community policing, which was discussed at this conference. Community policing, the strength of it, the success of it, is first, partnership. Police saying, for the first time, we cannot do this by ourselves. We need to work in partnership with the rest of the criminal justice system. We need to work in partnership with the business communities. We need to work, most importantly, in partnership with the communities of residents, the people that we are sworn to protect and to serve. Secondly, we needed to focus on the problems, big and small, that were creating fear, disorder, and crime in our communities. We needed to embrace problem-oriented or problem-solving policing. All those individual incidents, those minor crimes, if left unaddressed, became more serious. All those more serious crimes, if not addressed effectively, spawned even more crime. So problem-oriented policing was, as David talked about, hotspot policing. The idea of identifying where was crime growing, identify crime after 2 or 3 incidents as a problem, and put cops onto those hotspots. That was problem-oriented policing. And thirdly, and this is the most important element of what happened in my country, and if I understand what is going on in your country at this moment, you are embracing this, it is the importance of prevention of crime. Community policing is all about the prevention of crime. Sir Robert Peel had it so right in 1829 when he said that the basic mission of the police is the prevention of crime and disorder. And you measure our success by how much crime we prevent, not how quickly we respond to a crime, not how much crime we solve after the fact. It's important to do that. But no country in the world, I think, understands this system, this philosophy, more than your country. because you have been embracing it since your birth 66 years ago. And what you have also been embracing since your birth of necessity is something that my country only began to embrace in 2001. And that is the importance of prevention, not only to deal with traditional crime, minor and serious, but also to deal with the issue of terrorism. The importance of dealing with terrorism is to prevent it, rather than taking satisfaction that you arrest the terrorist after the fact. So in your country, you have, through your police services, through your Shin Bet, through all your intelligence services, throughout your brief history as a democracy, you have understood the importance of using information to develop intelligence, to tell you where to put your security forces, where to put your police, to prevent not only acts of terrorism, but to also help to prevent crime. Community policing thrived in America in the 1990s. Overall crime in my country went down 40% throughout the country. In New York City, it went down even more dramatically. Crime in New York City has now gone down every year for 24 straight years. In 1990, 2,242 murders. Last year, 2013, there were 336 murders in New York City, an 85% decline. 700,000 reported crimes in 1990. Last year, about 150,000, almost 75 to 80% decline in serious crime. But as importantly, and many of you have had the opportunity to visit my city, the way the city looks, the way it feels, the presence of police. It is a city that in the 1980s and early 90s was a very frightening experience to walk the streets. The aggressive beggars, the prostitutes, the gangs, the filth, the graffiti. It is a city today that is vibrant, it is alive, it is safe. On the subway system, the graffiti is gone, the beggars are gone, the vandalism is gone. We are constantly focusing on quality of life and on serious crime. We are focusing on what creates fear. And what creates fear certainly is serious crime, but it's what you see, it's how you feel. So by having a lot of police on the streets, very visible, having those police very active doing something, we have created an atmosphere in New York City where this year, if we continue at the current rate, that New York City will have about 300 murders this year, down from the historic low of last year of 336. The city is continuing to become safer. In 1994, when Mayor Giuliani became mayor, there were 24 million tourists who came to New York, but the number was declining dramatically because the city did not feel safe. People did not want to come. Last year in my city, there were 56 million tourists that came to New York City. The trend this year is that there will be even more. And each of those tourists spends money, creates jobs, creates new buildings, creates taxes that allows for the paying for more police, better schools, better infrastructure. You are a society, you are a country that is significantly dependent on tourism. You recognize the importance that your country is seen as safe, despite the always present threats of terrorism, despite the potential growing problem of organized crime, despite the problems of hooliganism and quality of life. You are recognizing, as this conference indicates, that there is a necessity that the public safety, criminal justice community, and the police must be continually and constantly improving vigilance to keep your country safe, to keep your community safe, not only for those 8.5 million Israelis who live here, but the millions that you want to attract here, to visit, to enjoy the beauty, to enjoy the history, to enjoy the significance of your country in the world. You understand it, as evidenced by this conference, the importance of prevention. In my country, as we moved through the 1990s, things certainly got better, but then something happened. 9/11, 2001, September 11, 2001, the World Trade Center attack, 3,000 civilian casualties. And in my country, unlike yours, for the first time, American policing, and American policing is a very different form of policing than in your country. You have one national police service, 30,000 officers. America has 17,000 different police departments with over 800,000 police officers. We have 50 states with 50 governors and 50 state police forces, 17,000 communities with mayors and city managers and individual police departments. We are an extraordinarily decentralized police environment in my country, very different than yours. But what was also different was we did not have the terrorism experiences that you have had since your birth. We did not have the need for our local police to focus on terrorism. That was the responsibility of the national government, the FBI and other agencies, because terrorism, the threat was over there, overseas. And while we experienced an occasional homegrown terrorist attack in the United States, there was nothing of the organized scale that we are now facing. So 9/11 changed forever American local policing, particularly in the city of New York, where we now had to deal with traditional serious crime, with quality of life crime, but like your country, our police were now going to have to deal with the threat of terrorism. We were going to have to train differently. We were going to have to develop exceptional intelligence and information skills. So the third revolution that has occurred in my country, the first one, 1970s, the movement to the professional model that ultimately failed, but many elements of it we kept. The community policing revolution and model of the 1990s, which we continue to embrace because it works, because of its partnership, its problem solving, its use of information to identify where crime is occurring, and the ability to put cops there quickly. That revolution has continued to be improved upon. The third revolution in my country began on 9/11, when we knew that now we were going to have to fight terrorism for the rest of our lives and the lives of our children and their children. It is part of the world we live in, and it's unfortunate. But we can defeat it. We can continue to defeat it. And we can continue to defeat it by the way you have been doing it in your country so successfully. Sometimes they're successful, but when you think of the many, many times they have not been, because of your commitment, your prioritization of the focus on preventing those acts. And so in the United States, fortunately in the 1990s, we understood the concept of the prioritization of prevention. So as we began to put together our counterterrorism skill sets in the 21st century, the new revolution in American policing, indeed world policing, is the information intelligence era of policing. This is the new revolution, taking huge amounts of information that are out there, big data, social media, analyzing it, and from that, making actionable intelligence so that we are in a position to identify much more frequently with our use of information in our creation of intelligence, when is an attack likely to occur? When is a crime likely to occur? It is a marvelous time in policing, because the skills that we have the ability to acquire, the skills that we have the ability to expand upon, the partnerships that we can make across the world. The Police Commissioner of New York City coming to meet with the Police Commissioner of the Israeli National Police. Why? So we can learn from each other. We can acquire each other's skills. We can learn what worked, what didn't work, so that we don't repeat the mistakes and we ensure that we effectively implement the successes. The new revolution in policing, the new era of policing, is called in my country predictive policing. We are fast approaching a time with the vast amounts of information we have access to, that we can make intelligence from, that we will increasingly, as we have done so successfully with terrorism, certainly in your country, and in my country, and certainly in New York City, 16 acts of terrorism have been prevented in New York because of partnership, collaboration, use of information to make intelligence. We are now moving into an era in policing, and it's one of the reasons I came back into policing once again in New York City, because I want to be part of this new revolution, this ability to predict that a crime will occur in this geographic area around this time. And knowing that, we can put a cop on the dot, hotspot policing, if you will. Everything old is new again. Hotspot policing, an old concept that worked so effectively in the 1990s with CompStat. In the 21st century, hotspot policing is becoming predictive policing. The development of algorithms at our major universities that will allow us to predict. Can we prevent all crime? No, but we need to use that as our goal. There is an expression we use in American policing, an expression that a very dear friend of mine who is now departed, his name was Jack Maple. Jack Maple was very instrumental in New York City in developing many of the crime strategies, the CompStat system, that have proven so successful and that have withstood this test of time. And Jack Maple had an expression, and I think this expression, I hope it translates into Hebrew. You can expect what you inspect. In the 1990s, we began to focus on crime. And by focusing on crime, we could expect reductions in crime. When we were focusing on the response to crime, it's a different set of measurements. But when we began to focus on prevention of crime, you align your police resources differently, your priorities are different, your expectations are different. It is a phenomenal time to be in the profession of policing. Policing that is now international, policing that is now global. In the democracies of the world, and fortunately there are so many, we are all in this together. While our democracies might be different, in my country it's a constitutional democracy, here you're a democracy of laws. What we all embrace is what democracy promises. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of education, all the benefits of a democracy, all the promises of democracy. If you do not have public safety, if you do not have what we are committing our lives to, then all the promises of democracy are built on a very shaky foundation. We are privileged in our lives to be part of the great experiment about democracy and its capabilities and its survivability. I am very proud to be part of policing in my country, as you are proud to be part of policing in your country, and the essential role that we have played and that we will play in ensuring that democracy survives for our children and our children's children. And we are strengthened in democracies when we collaborate together, when we form partnerships. And so I thank the Israeli government, the Israeli police services, your ministry, for the opportunity to strengthen the partnership that was already strong between my city, my country, and your city and your country for the vital mission that we are all engaged in, and that is the preservation of our democracies. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Bratton. Please stay 1 second. We would like to give you a present. Hoping that you had a good time in Israel, someone is going to give you a little present. Can he come? מנכ"ל המשרד לביטחון פנים, רותם פלג, is going to give you a present. Well, it's an album of nice pictures that were taken here during your 3 days of visit. Even today, pictures from this day, hoping that you will have a good memory.
These are fast. Thank you. Miriam, is this your handiwork? Some of it. She's been everywhere.
This is a book of recipes from Israel.
A book of recipes, no less.
Yes.
Wow.
Maybe I can get my lovely wife, Ricky, to finally cook.
Maybe you will have time to cook. No? No? You never cook, huh? No. Police officers are very busy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. אין ספק שיש הרבה מאוד מה ללמוד מהאיש הזה, ולומדים. כנראה שלומדים. ישבתי כנראה עם האנשים הנכונים במהלך ארוחת הצהריים, ולמדתי שם שהשנה נרשם מספר מקרי הרצח הנמוך ביותר מזה 18 שנה. וכדאי גם את זה לומר.